There was this tug-of-war of falling in love with her, but knowing her situation was impossible. He was unhinged, you know, this man's lurking everywhere I go.
We believe we know who's responsible for the crime.
I just thought, oh, he did it. He did it. He killed her.
Nicole and her friend Ronald Goldman were discovered in a pool of blood.
I certainly felt Ron Goldman could have been me. I still owe it to Nicole, as a man who had fallen in love with her, to share this piece of her that he couldn't take away, you know? We know she's the most famous victim of domestic violence, and we don't know anything about her. I'd collected all the things we'd shared, and I tucked it away and I hid it. She says, I'm missing you like crazy, love me. When I finally sifted through these things, they had a different meaning to me. I rediscovered someone that I had forgotten about, who was a lot different than portrayed by the media, and who was overshadowed by the trial and by O.J. Simpson. It brought back all the beauty, all the wonderful moments we shared together. This story really began writing itself in 1989 when I first met Nicole. I was working for Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills. Kris Jenner was Kardashian at the time, was a very good friend, and she would always call and invite me to a spontaneous lunch. I'll never forget, we were on San Vicente Boulevard and I saw the coral trees, and they were blooming like I've never seen anything like it in Los Angeles before. I asked her, I said, what are we doing? And she said, oh, you're meeting one of my best friends, Nicole, and I would love for you to connect her with some people at Neiman's. You could help her with some shoes. She has to attend a black tie with OJ. And of course I said, oh, who doesn't know O.J. Simpson, of course. So Kris alluded that, yeah, she's going through a little difficult time, you know, with her marriage. It's tumultuous sort of thing. So I showed her some shoes, and that was it. 3 years later, I got a phone call from Kris. She says, you can't imagine who I just ran into last night, and she asked about you. She separated from OJ. She looks the best she's ever looked. She's happy. She's a totally different woman, and she asked about you, and I was shocked. So we went to dinner, and I was mesmerized by her newfound freedom. She looked me in the eye and she said, Kris told me you were really nervous about getting together tonight. And I was bowled over by how bold she was to say that. And I said, well, you know, look, I wanted to say, well, look, you're going through a separation. But I said, no, I wasn't apprehensive. I'm glad we got together. And she said, great, well, let's plan on going for a run sometime.
There you go.
I had started mountain biking with Bruce, who identifies as Caitlin now. So Caitlin and I would mountain bike ride, you know, once or twice a week. When we got to the top of that mountain, and we'd always walk out there and just have an idle chit chat, you know. And she said, oh, big date with Nicole tonight. She looked me in the eye and she said, OJ will always be your problem. I was so attracted to her. It felt so right to me. And that warning from Caitlin, it started to get a little more distant. I learned a few things about her. One was she was a foodie. She had destination dishes around Los Angeles, and she loved this Seal album. It had just come out. No one ever gonna survive. So we were listening to Seal, you know, kissing on the sofa, and I just remember walking out of her house, and I got this eerie sense. And I get to my car, and I kept kind of feeling like I need to look over my shoulder. I remember driving away and looking in the rearview mirror, thinking that was a very strange feeling. I had a friend, a producer in the industry, who called me out of the blue, and he said, hey, I understand you went out on a date with Nicole Brown Simpson. Have you lost your mind? You're stepping into a very volatile situation. One side of me was falling in love with this woman, and the other side of me was wondering if love was even possible with someone in a situation like hers, especially with the man she was trying to separate herself from. She told me that she spoke to OJ and she challenged him on coming to the house when she was there with someone, and he said he just happened to be driving by and he wanted to make sure everything was okay. And no wonder when I walked out of her house that evening why I felt this strange, eerie feeling. By then, I realized there was no way I could resist her. I finally confessed that I had fallen in love with her. And I just felt like, wow, this is getting really serious. And she took a deep breath and she said, I told him. And I said, told him, told what? And she said, I told OJ I'd fallen in love with you. And wow, I don't know, I felt like a cold water was just thrown into my face. And I was really surprised. And I said, why would you say that to him? And she said, look, I'm living my life openly and honestly. And I'm going to tell him how I feel. And it's the truth. And I don't want him coming between what we have. That producer friend of mine knew I was continuing with my relationship with her. And he really gave it to me straight. He said, you've really lost your mind. You're about to step on a landmine, your foot's in midair, pull back, walk away. Don't take that step forward. And I did say, it's easy for you to say that where you sit. And he said, well, from where I sit is reality. And that OJ thinks he could do whatever he wants. His words, and just like Caitlin's, they kind of fell silent whenever I was close to her again. By then, she finally confessed to me about the abuse. She said, he beat me really badly. And the way she described it, I remembered every word. It was so visceral. The sound of fists, and the pain was so intense she blacked out. She told me that. She really thought she was going to die. Through her tears, I'll never forget, she said, I'll never go back to that man. I'd rather die than go back to him. That's what she said. It changed my relationship tremendously because I was woefully unprepared for something like that. I knew nothing about domestic violence at all. And I didn't know what I could do to help. So I don't know. One morning we went for a run and her friend Cora showed up to run with us. And I look ahead and I see this man with 2 children. And then Cora, she seizes up like, oh my God. And she takes her hand and digs her fingernails into my upper arm so hard. She gouged into my skin. She said, Joseph, whatever you do, you need to keep running. And there's OJ. Before I passed him by, it almost felt like he marked me a little bit. Like we looked at each other and he looked at me but his glare was like penetrating. Before that, he was this figure, I imagined him to be OJ Simpson in a certain way. Until that day when I saw him, I felt like I was seeing something that very few people had seen. Nicole was very upset, and she felt like he followed her with the children to make her look bad, and he was supposed to be away with the kids for the weekend. But she kind of was, look, it's Brentwood, he lives close by, these things are going to happen. And that was a big shift for me. I just thought, I don't think I could live my life like this, feeling like this man's lurking everywhere I go. And I decided to end the relationship. I'd collected all the things we'd shared, the books, the cards and letters she had given me, and I put it in this briefcase, and I tucked it away and I hid it. And I decided that was it. I can't do this anymore. We kept in touch. She wanted to be friends, She called me that summer just to update me on a few things, called one day, hey, guess who's officially single? Her divorce had gone through. So that was a relief. I thought things would be easier for her now. Since breaking things off with Nicole, I wasn't spending as much time with the Jenners. They were living in Beverly Hills by then. They left Malibu. So Christmas of 1993, I saw Caitlin at the gym. Couldn't have been nicer. Like, Joseph, where the heck you been? The kids miss you. You got to come to the Christmas Eve party. When I walked into the party, everybody's eyes were on me, and the entire room fell silent, like dead silent. Everything stopped. And I looked over and I see Nicole, and I turn around and OJ's behind me. And I had heard a rumor that they were back together, but I didn't give it credence because I thought about that night in Laguna when she cried and said she'd never go back to him. And I said, I don't know why I said, hi, OJ, you're looking well. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. He was unhinged, he's sweating, and he's holding this flute in his hand, and wasn't sure what he was going to do with it. Was he going to smash, Then he placed it down, and he looks at me with this chilling, stare, dead in my eyes, and he said, "It's only an illusion." And then he turned around and walked out the door and stormed out of the house. And the party was instantly in shambles because the way he stormed out of the house, he was taking everything with it. I looked and I saw Nicole. I just felt like, okay, this was it. This is what she decided. And I felt like that was the last time I was going to see her. I knew it because I knew I was never going to go back to that world.
Many can't believe that this has happened, especially that he has run from the scene.
I got a phone call, and it was a mutual friend of ours, and he was talking so fast, I couldn't even really understand him. And then I somehow heard Nicole and murdered, and then I stopped hearing, and it just hit me. I just thought, oh, he did it. He did it. He killed her. I became sort of a zombie, I think, while all this was going on and the whole country was getting swept up in this. I was still kind of processing that she had been killed and the way she was killed. And that's when I remembered, I thought, gosh, I put all those little things I wrote about her. That spring we spent together, I have it all. Let me go find it and say goodbye to her. I went into the closet. I remember where I put that briefcase, and it was gone. So I walked away from all that, and I never grieved her death, and I pretended to never love her for all those years.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson.
When the verdict was read, I remember seeing them celebrating, and I remember looking into that TV, trying to see his eyes, and I remembered those chilling words, "It's only an illusion." It all hit me really hard that moment, watching that. The briefcase that had been missing for all those years suddenly turned up 3 years later. I was living in New York at the time, and Elaine, the woman that lived in that house, called to say, "I found your briefcase you were looking for." It looked like a portal I was about to slip into. And I did. The moment I opened it, I saw her book, her favorite book. I felt like it was incumbent upon me to do something significant with these things, I drove to Brentwood, and I walked along the Meridian, and the coral trees were in bloom. And I saw this beautiful story coming together. And as I pieced it all back together, I saw her coming back to life. She was this spiritual woman who was looking for peace and tranquility and happiness, and hopefully this in some small way will open up people's hearts and minds to who this woman really truly was.